I'm joined now by All Rise News' Adam Klasfeld. Adam, you are in New York right now at the arraignment for Nicolas Maduro, the former or ousted president of Venezuela who was brought to the U.S. So first and foremost, can you talk about what happened at the arraignment today?
So what happened at the arraignment, in essence, was that Nicolas Maduro and his wife Celia Flores pleaded not guilty to the counts of the indictment charged against them. But there was more, of course, that happened beyond that. These are historic proceedings. And as Nicolas Maduro entered the courtroom, he immediately noticed the filled ceremonial courthouse, the fact that the jury box was filled with reporters, as was the gallery. He greeted them Happy New Year three times before sitting down. And these are, if you've ever attended an arraignment, these are very formal proceedings. You are alerted of your rights. Your things like verifying your name is something that happens. And so the 92-year-old judge, Alvin Hellerstein, prompted Mr. Maduro to give his name. And Maduro replied with a speech. He said, "I'm the president of Venezuela." He said that he was kidnapped in a military operation. He was interrupted by the judge at that point, said, "You will have all the time you need to air this when the proceedings proceed. But right now, I am simply asking you your name." He repeated his name. And so quite a lot happened surrounding the proceedings. There was a man in the gallery, Pedro Rojas, who, when Maduro started on that speech, when he described himself as the president of Venezuela, shouted out "Jamás," meaning never in Spanish. And there was a little exchange with them at the end of the proceedings. Tensions are high, Mr. Rojas said outside the courtroom, speaking to reporters, that he himself was targeted by the government, which is what brought him there to watch the proceedings.
All right, so I have a few questions here, but the first, and this might betray a little of my naivety on this topic, but can you talk about the legality of basically extracting a world leader, a president of a different country, and bringing them into the United States? And I mean, does that open the floodgates for any foreign leader who we view as a criminal to be extracted and brought to the United States?
It's an absolutely great question, Brian. And we found out today that it is a question that will be litigated in these proceedings. Nicolas Maduro is represented by Julian Assange's attorney, Barry Pollock, also by David Wickstrom, who is a public defender who previously represented a co-defendant of former Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez, who Trump pardoned. So to your question, Brian, the legality of the raid that whisked Maduro to this New York federal courthouse today is something that Barry Pollock, his attorney, promised to litigate. And here's the backdrop. I expect the government to say that this happened with former Panamanian dictator Manuel Noriega back in the 1980s under George H.W. Bush. But I expect that this will be distinguished by the fact that the Panamanian government at the time declared war on the United States. Courts will have to grapple with the fact of what guardrails, if there is an indictment anywhere in the world, will an indictment justify taking away a purported head of state or any national anywhere? It's a formal extradition process, a thing of the past. In the Noriega case, Noriega's convictions for drug trafficking and other offenses were affirmed. And so there is precedent for something like this happening. Although we heard today from Barry Pollock, the defense attorney for Mr. Maduro, that he will challenge it. They are going to claim that that Mr. Maduro has sovereign immunity, and I expect that the U.S. government will say that he has been illegitimately serving as the president of Venezuela since the 2018 election and the National Assembly declaring Mr. Maduro a usurper in 2019. So the question that you pose is a very good one. It's one that we will hear more about. There's going to be a hearing in this very courthouse right behind me on March 17th, and I think we'll engage in these very questions.
Okay, stop right there. The Noriega comparison the government will use is fundamentally dishonest, and here's why. Yes, the United States invaded Panama in 1989 and captured Manuel Noriega, but Panama's National Assembly had declared a state of war with the U.S. 5 days before the invasion. That's a formal declaration of hostilities. Under international law, that changes everything. You can capture enemy leaders during declared warfare. Venezuela hasn't declared war on the United States. Maduro hasn't authorized attacks on U.S. territory. There's been zero military aggression from Venezuela that would justify this response. Second difference, the international community broadly supported action against Noriega. The Organization of American States had condemned his regime. With Maduro, you have a completely split world. The US and EU don't recognize him, but Russia, China, Iran, Turkey, Cuba, they all still recognize Maduro as Venezuela's legitimate leader. He still holds Venezuela's seat at the UN. So when the US says Maduro is illegitimate, that's a unilateral American determination that half the world disagrees with, and we're using that to justify a military operation on foreign soil. Third, the Noriega invasion had congressional authorization. There was a process. With Maduro, we have no evidence Congress approved this. Trump appears to have acted unilaterally. This is why Barry Pollock, Julian Assange's attorney, took this case. He specializes in government overreach and extradition abuse. And that March 17th hearing is going to be explosive because the core question is, does the United States get to decide which world leaders are legitimate and then use military force to grab the ones we don't like? That's not international law. That's might makes right. And as Ian Bremmer warned, what we do today, our enemies can do tomorrow. This precedent goes both ways.
I mean, would this lead us into a world where, if an opponent of Vladimir Putin comes into office and says, well, Putin clearly didn't win his election with 98% of the vote or whatever vote total he claims to have gotten. And so does that give us grounds then to go into Russia, into the Kremlin and just, pluck Vladimir Putin out of office and bring him into the United States in very much the same way that Nicolas Maduro was?
Right. So, I mean, to your point, Brian, there are two different things that we're grappling with. This is U.S. law and the entire international order. And you talk about other authoritarian rulers anywhere around the globe. These are norms that are going to be set around the world. What about other governments? One of the benefits we have as a U.S. citizen is that if a foreign dictatorship decides that someone has committed a crime because they have spoken badly about the regime, that our courts are there as a bulwark, that you can go to your court. There will be a formal extradition process. You can contest it. Are we moving into a world? And I think this is going to be part of a broader conversation, although not necessarily the conversation that transpires in this courthouse, of what does this do for U.S. law and precedent, and what does this do for the world moving forward?
By that same logic, is there a world where another country can say that Donald Trump is as bad as we say Nicolas Maduro is, and that they then have grounds based on what we're doing here in the United States to come in and pluck Donald Trump out of the United States and bring him into, some judicial proceedings in a different country?
Right after the raid in Caracas and the arrest of Maduro going and his being sent first to Guantanamo Bay to be handed off and sent to the Southern District of New York, there was a big international response. And political scientist Ian Brenner said essentially to be careful that what we do today, one's enemies can do the next day, and that the law of the jungle, the might makes right world, can harm everyone. Other things that we learned in court today, I would say that, so Celia Cruz, you could see at the defense table, had a bandage over her right eye, some on her temple. And so she appeared a little injured, and her attorney made a point to say that he wanted a medical examination, that these are injuries he said that she sustained during the raid on the compound. I expect that will be litigated. We're going to hear a lot more about this. This is, once things come to court, what is going to be explored are, for one, the allegations of the indictment, the narco trafficking conspiracy, the allegations of terrorism links, and all of that, yes, but also the legality of the raid, what actually happened, what sovereign immunity arguments are there, and what kind of world are we going to have going forward in terms of U.S. law and the international order.
Adam, does the fact that Trump just pardoned the former Honduran president for basically importing 400 tons of drugs into the United States, does that undermine this case where the U.S. government claims to take such a hard line against narco terrorists when the last thing they did with the previous narco terrorist, who just so happened to be another South American world leader, was to basically give that person immunity?
So we'll see if Maduro's lawyers bring it up. It certainly undermines the public rationale for this. If you have a foreign government leader, foreign Honduran president, Juan Orlando Hernandez, who was convicted by a jury of, as you said, a narco trafficking conspiracy that involved 400 tons of cocaine, and evidence came out at trial that he accepted bribes from El Chapo, and that Mr. Hernandez was pardoned by Trump after appealing to his sense of I am a prosecuted former president. That it certainly undermines it in the public eye. Now, will it undermine it over the course of these proceedings? Well, this remains to be seen. We'll see. One thing that is notable is that he has retained two lawyers, a private counsel and a public defender, and the public defender represented someone in Juan Orlando Hernandez's conspiracy case. A co-conspirator of Mr. Hernandez is now one of the public defenders who is representing Mr. Maduro.
This is where the entire justification collapses. Let me spell out the timeline of hypocrisy. Juan Orlando Hernandez was president of Honduras from 2014 to 2022. He was extradited to the United States and went on trial in the Southern District of New York, the same courthouse where Maduro is right now. A jury convicted him in March 2023 of conspiring to import cocaine into the United States. The evidence was devastating: 400 tons of cocaine, testimony that he personally met with El Chapo and accepted bribes. Prosecutors called him a narco president who turned Honduras into a narco state. He was sentenced to 45 years in federal prison in June 2024. Then Trump pardoned him, just wiped it away. The justification? J.O. claimed he was a persecuted former president being targeted for political reasons. Trump bought that argument. Now the United States conducts a military raid, kidnaps Maduro, and charges him with narco-terrorism and drug trafficking, the exact same crimes Juan Orlando was convicted of by a jury. So we'll pardon one South American leader convicted of trafficking hundreds of tons of cocaine, but we'll launch a military operation to capture another accused of the same thing. And here's the kicker that Adam just mentioned. Maduro's public defender represented a co-conspirator in the Juan Orlando case. That means the defense has direct knowledge of all the evidence against JOH. They're going to argue selective prosecution. You pardoned our client's co-conspirator, so how can you claim this is about justice and not politics? The government will say Maduro is worse, more dangerous, whatever, but you can't claim to take a principled stand against narco-trafficking when you literally pardoned someone convicted of the same crimes by a jury. This isn't about stopping drugs from entering America. If it was, J.O. would still be in prison. This is about power. This is about Trump wanting to look strong, and that makes the legal and moral foundation of this entire operation a joke.
Adam, I was surprised to see that the judge presiding over this case is 92 years old. I'm curious, in watching the judge preside, how did he look? It's not every day, especially with the issue of age so prevalent in politics today. How is a 92-year-old judge presiding over this case?
He's a very sharp nonagenarian. One thing about Alvin Hellerstein, he presided over a case very similar to this one, not counting this conspiracy case. Last year in 2025, in May, he released a ruling blocking Trump's invocation of the Alien Enemies Act, which was premised on the idea that the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua is an arm of the Venezuelan state involved in an invasion of the U.S. Judge Hellerstein was the one who ruled that was illegal, that there was no invasion, and that the legal justification that premised whisking away 200 men to what he described as a notoriously evil prison, El Salvador's CICOT prison, and that this was a judge who is known as a sharp defender of civil liberties. He's been on the bench a long time. He is 92 years old. He ordered the release, as I recall, of Abu Ghraib videos back in the day. But he one thing to talk about his age a bit. When he began the proceedings, he said that one of his jobs is to guarantee Mr. Maduro a fair trial, but he also gave a crack about his age and his height. He said he was taking the bench and sitting behind one of those monitors where during the trial, the parties and the judge might take a look at what is in the running transcript. And he said the problem with being short is that the judges are obscured by the modern technology. So, he's a charming person. He's a tough judge, and he's been known as someone who can hold the government's feet to the fire.
Last question here, Adam. What is the environment like there? I mean, this is a historic moment that you're right in the middle of, where the U.S. has basically extradited a sitting president of a foreign country into a federal courtroom in New York. And so, what is the atmosphere like where you are?
Well, I mean, the historic weight of the moment is apparent. Anyone who's been in the court and surrounding the court. Mr. Maduro began his speech today by saying, "I am a kidnapped president." There was a person in the gallery who was so incensed by what Mr. Maduro was saying that when he said, "I am the president of Venezuela," shouted out "Jamás," meaning never in Spanish. That after the proceeding, when Mr. Maduro said again that he's the president of Venezuela, he shouted out "Illegitimate."
Yeah.
We right across the street from where I am. It's a few hours after the arraignment, so it has broken up. But there were two pretty sizable protests. There were strong critics of the Maduro regime on the left, and there were people who were very strong critics of U.S. actions to my right. And many of them have been staying along. Many of them have been speaking to reporters. But this is a place where tensions are high, where the secrets of two governments are spilling out of the federal courthouse and will do so for months and maybe years to come. So I expect that this won't be the last major demonstration outside 500 Pearl Street related to the case of Nicolas Maduro.
Adam just said something chilling earlier. The secrets of two governments are spilling out in the federal courthouse and will do so for months and maybe years to come. And that gets at what makes this so dangerous beyond just the Maduro case. This trial is going to expose American intelligence operations in Venezuela. It's going to reveal CIA assets, military planning, surveillance programs, and every authoritarian government in the world is watching and taking notes. Because here's what Trump just announced to the world. If the United States decides you're illegitimate, we can launch a military operation into your capital, extract you by force, and put you on trial in New York. No UN authorization needed. No international coalition. No declaration of war. Just raw American power. China is watching this. Russia is watching this. Every country that has tensions with the United States is now thinking, could they do this to our leaders? And the answer, legally, after this precedent, is yes. If the U.S. can do it to Venezuela, why can't Russia do it to a Baltic leader? Why can't China do it to Taiwan's president if they claim Taiwan is illegitimate? Why can't Iran do it to an Iraqi politician they claim is an American puppet? The answer used to be because those are violations of international law and sovereignty. But the United States just violated those exact same norms. So what's the counter-argument now? Rules for thee, but not for me? Judge Hellerstein blocked Trump's use of the Alien Enemies Act last year when Trump claimed Trendiaragua was conducting an invasion. Hellerstein said, no, that's not an invasion. You can't abuse that law. So we have a judge who's already shown skepticism of Trump's Venezuela policy. But even if Hellerstein rules against the government on the legality of the raid, the damage is done. The operation already happened. Maduro is already in custody. The precedent is already set. And that's what makes these protests so important. Those aren't just protests about Maduro. Those are protests about what kind of world we're creating. On one side, you have Venezuelans who hate Maduro and see this as justice. On the other side, you have people who see this as American imperialism and a threat to every country's sovereignty. Both sides have a point, and the fact that we're having this debate at all shows how far outside normal legal and diplomatic channels this operation was. This is going to define American foreign policy for years, and not in the way Trump thinks.